Hey, what's up, Thought Spiral crew? Have you ever gone on a casual Netflix scroll looking for something to watch, only to get totally lost in its endless sea of recommendations? 1 second, you're searching for a quick 90-minute movie, and the next, you're 45 minutes deep into some bizarre Korean zombie rom-com series. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. So here's the thing. Netflix isn't just about what's new or trending. Oh no, my friends, if you dig deep enough, real deep, past the binge-worthy TV dramas and those random action movies from the 80s, you'll stumble upon the weird stuff. And I mean real weird. But have you ever wondered how we ended up with this never-ending digital treasure chest? Today, we're diving into the story behind Netflix, how it went from a humble DVD rental service to the all-consuming content behemoth we know today. Way back in the late 90s, Netflix was just your friendly neighborhood DVD mail service. You'd pick a movie, they'd mail it to you, and when you were done, you'd send it back. Boom. Simple. And that was cool. Until, it wasn't. Because guess what? People don't like waiting. I mean, who has the time to wait for anything anymore? So fast forward to 2007, and Netflix makes the smartest move of its life. They ditch the mailing business and jump headfirst into streaming. Now, anyone with a decent internet connection could stream movies and shows straight to their laptop, their TV, even their phones. Crazy, right? But here's the wild part. Netflix didn't stop there. No, they had a master plan. Instead of just licensing content from studios, they thought, what if we make our own stuff? What if we become the platform and the studio? And that's when things got really interesting. In 2013, Netflix dropped House of Cards, and that changed everything. Suddenly, Netflix wasn't just a platform where you watched old movies and reruns. They were creating shows so good, you didn't even care what cable TV had to offer anymore. In fact, some of you might not even remember what cable TV looks like at this point. I know I don't. And here's the kicker. Netflix knew exactly what we wanted before we even knew. They had this crazy advantage because, unlike TV networks, they had all our data. They knew when we paused, when we binged, when we dropped a show after 10 minutes. Netflix was learning our habits faster than we could say, next episode. But the secret sauce? Oh, that's Netflix's massive library. I'm talking over 16,000 titles. To put that into perspective, if you decided to start watching Netflix right now, non-stop, it'd take you over 3.5 years to get through it all, and that's assuming you don't sleep. Add 8 hours of shut-eye, and it'll take you 5.5 years. Yeah, it's that big, and it's constantly growing. So what happens? A lot of shows and movies just disappear, buried under layers of new content like some forgotten relics of the past. But Netflix's journey from a simple DVD mailer to a streaming empire was no accident. It was all about strategy, debt, and that irresistible promise of endless content. But here's where things start to get weird. You might think Netflix's rise to the top was all about those high-budget, critically acclaimed shows like House of Cards or Narcos, right? Well, kind of. But Netflix had its wild experiments too. And nothing screams wild like Richie Rich. Yeah, you remember Richie Rich, right? That classic comic book character who swam in gold coins like a mini Scrooge McDuck. Well, in 2015, Netflix reimagined him. Except this time, he's not just rich because of family money. Nope. This Richie Rich became a trillionaire by harnessing the power of, wait for it, unused vegetables. Yup, you heard that right. He used all the veggies he didn't eat to become the world's first trillionaire. Genius, right? So now he lives in a mansion with an amusement park, a robot maid, and oh yeah, his best friend is none other than Jenna Ortega. Yeah, that Jenna Ortega before she took over Netflix again with Wednesday. This show was one of the early Netflix originals, and it was, let's just say it was weirdly experimental. But here's the kicker. Richie Rich wasn't even made for Netflix originally. It was actually produced for YouTube, but Netflix swooped in, grabbed it, and boom, now it's in the Netflix vault forever. It's like Netflix was saying, we don't care what it is. As long as it's content, we'll take it. And that's part of what made Netflix so unpredictable in those early years. They were willing to take risks on just about anything. Sure, it wasn't the next Stranger Things, but this experiment marked the start of Netflix's wild content spree. They were grabbing shows left and right, experimenting with what worked and what didn't. And trust me, Richie Rich was definitely one of those didn'ts. But you gotta admire the boldness. Honestly, it's kind of hilarious to think that Netflix, the same platform that brought us shows like The Crown and Ozark, also gave us a vegetable-powered trillionaire kid. But hey, that's the beauty of Netflix's early experiments. They weren't afraid to get weird, and sometimes that's how you find the magic. So, Richie Rich might not be on your must-watch list, but it's a great example of how Netflix was trying to figure out what we wanted by throwing everything at the wall and seeing what stuck. Alright, so we've covered how Netflix experimented with content like Richie Rich, but let's get into the real secret behind Netflix's massive growth. Spoiler alert. It's not magic, it's money. And not just any money, borrowed money. Yep, Netflix didn't just make all this content out of thin air. They had a strategy, a risky one, but one that worked, at least for a while. Between 2014 and 2019, Netflix borrowed billions of dollars. I'm talking about enough money to fund the next 10 space missions or, pay off my student loans and yours. So why did Netflix keep borrowing? Well, the plan was simple. Borrow big, make tons of shows, bring in tons of subscribers, and then profit. But here's the catch. Netflix needed to keep borrowing more and more to keep this engine running. It was like this giant content flywheel that couldn't stop spinning. In 2014, they issued $400 million in debt. The next year, another $1.5 billion. By 2019, Netflix had racked up over $15 billion in long-term debt. $15 billion. That's a lot of zeros, folks. But here's the wild part. Netflix wasn't just burning through this cash for fun. They were using it to fund their shows and movies at an insane pace. You've probably noticed Netflix releasing a new show every other day, right? Well, now you know why. The strategy was to overwhelm the competition by throwing so much content out there that you couldn't not find something to watch. And it worked. For years, Netflix became the king of streaming. They built this massive library with over 16,000 titles. Yeah, remember that stat from earlier? But here's the kicker. The debt just kept piling up, and that's when people started calling them Debtflix. So was it sustainable? Well, that's the billion-dollar question, literally. Netflix's whole model depended on keeping us subscribed, binge watching, and more importantly, not canceling. As long as they kept pumping out fresh content, they could keep borrowing more to fund the next wave. But even with all that borrowed cash, some people started asking, is Netflix biting off more than it can chew? I mean, $15 billion in debt is no joke, and eventually they'd have to pay the piper, right? So, we've talked about how Netflix borrowed billions, pumped out endless content, and basically changed the way we watch TV. But here's the thing. With all this content flying at us, are we actually enjoying it more? Think about it. You open Netflix and there's like thousands of options. But instead of being excited, you're like, ugh, too many choices. It's like going to an all-you-can-eat buffet and realizing you're too full after the first plate. So you end up watching the same thing you've seen 10 times before. The Office, anyone? And here's the kicker. While Netflix keeps pumping out new shows and movies, a lot of them get buried before you even know they exist. I mean, how many of you have heard of Ginny and Georgia? Yeah, I didn't think so. And yet, it's one of Netflix's most watched shows with nearly 1 billion viewer hours. It's kind of wild. We've got this never-ending stream of new content, but half of it slips right past us. The algorithm shows you what it thinks you'll like, but you still miss out on so much. And that's the paradox. Netflix is giving us more content than ever, but sometimes it feels like none of it really matters. And remember that $15 billion in debt? Yeah, that's gotta be paid back somehow. In fact, Netflix has already started making moves, cutting big budget projects, laying off staff, and even, wait for it, introducing ads. Yep, Netflix now has an ad-supported tier, basically inviting back the very thing they promised to save us from. So, what does this all mean? Is Netflix still the king of streaming? Or are we heading toward a future where quantity trumps quality, and every show feels like it's just another drop in the endless ocean of content? At the end of the day, it's hard to say. Netflix might have transformed entertainment as we know it, but with so much content and so much debt, they're now in a race to keep us watching and paying. And honestly, who knows? Maybe in a few years, we'll be looking at a completely different streaming landscape, one where Netflix isn't the top dog anymore. But for now, the real question is, how much Netflix is too much Netflix?